Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I've got a really good tip for you that will help you catch more post-spawn fish. We all know that during the spawning process, both male and female bass can become extremely lethargic from the process of mating and protecting the eggs and protecting the fry and laying the eggs. And both male and female bass can be in very lethargic moods. So what that means is they're not aggressively feeding. In my opinion, they take some time off in terms of just recuperating. They don't expel that much energy, which means they're not feeding that heavily. So during the post-spawn period, it can be really difficult to have successful days on the water because the fish just are not feeding that heavily. But if you present them with the right bait, you can get them to bite. And what I mean by right bait is you need a bait that is going to provide them with a pretty good sized meal. You need a bait that's not going to be a hard meal for them to chase down. And you need a meal that kind of mimics the fish that they're going to be preying on as they move out of the post-spawn blues into the summer months. And that's what I think you need to be doing today, is using this particular bait. And before I tell you what that particular bait is, I do want to remind you guys that if you're looking to purchase some tackle and want to support the channel, please use the Tackle Warehouse affiliate link that I provide in the description. It's a great way to support the channel. If you bookmark it for future purchases, that will also help the channel out. And at the same time, guys, if you're looking for a little bit of help on your local lakes or the lakes in your area, go to the fishthemoment.com website, link that's in the description. Myself, Randy Blockett, Johnny Schultz have done a ton of lake breakdowns, which will provide you with waypoints and direction as to how to attack those lakes for better success. So check that out. All right, guys. So going back a long time ago, when I was back in high school and college, one of my favorite baits that I used to like to throw were creature baits. And a creature bait is a much heftier style of plastic bait. Lots of legs, lots of appendages, very big, bulky baits. And one thing I always found is that these baits excelled for me during the post-spawn period. Now, at that time, I didn't realize what was going on. I didn't understand. I just knew that creature baits were really good for me kind of in that early summer period. Well, what's happened since then is I've really dialed in this technique that creature baits are really good during the post-spawn period for several reasons. One, they're big, bulky baits, so it's a big meal for the fish. And a lot of times, fish that are recovering from the spawn, they're in that post-spawn blues, they would rather eat a big meal and use that larger meal to store up energy than have to try to chase down a bunch of smaller prey. So it's easier for them to eat one big meal and they get more out of it. A creature bait at the same time really does a good job of mimicking bluegill because of its bigger, bulkier style. And as we all know, after the post-spawn, what happens? The bluegill spawn takes place. So during the spawning period, bass were fighting off bluegill. So they're mad at the bluegill to begin with. And then the bluegill start spawning and the bass kind of take their revenge by feeding on bluegill. So we know that the bass quickly go from spawning phases into feeding on the bluegill because the bluegill really starts spawning at the same time the bass do and shortly thereafter. So when you have a big bait with a bunch of different appendages, what happens is that mimics a bluegill really well, which is going to be a natural prey for the largemouth. So that's another thing that it does. Lastly, if you fish these in the correct manner, they are very slow moving, gliding baits through the water that present themselves as a large, easy meal for the bass to feed on, which is kind of that third criteria that, in my opinion, is the key to getting pre-spawn or post-spawn bass to bite more. So guys, here are some of my favorite ones just to point out to you so you can see what I'm talking about. I really use three creature styles. The reason I'm doing this video actually is because I just saw that Tackle Warehouse has one of my favorite baits back in stock, which has been discontinued for a long time. And that is The Gambler Bacon Rind, guys, that's what this bait is. This was the creature bait that I started with years and years ago. And I mean, you can see on here, it was the 1999 Classic Winning Bait by Davey Height. So we're talking, that was 23 years ago at this point. I feel like the Bacon Rind has probably been discontinued for at least 10 years. I bought a whole pile of these up when I found out that they were discontinued. But one of the keys to the Bacon Rind, and like I said, these are back in stock now at Tackle Warehouse. So Gambler has actually has come back out with the Bacon Rind. I do not know if they offer the smaller size, like there was a Bacon Rind Junior and a Bacon Bits, I think is what it was. You may be able to get those at Tackle Warehouse as well, but I know they have the Bacon Rind back in stock. The reason I really like this one so much is because I think it's the best gliding creature bait for a couple of reasons. It's got solid wings up front that are bigger than any other bait. So one of the other ones that I really like too is the Zoom Brush Hog, and then we've got the Berkeley Power Hog. They've all got these wings, as you can see. They've all got these wings, but the difference with the Gambler one is the wings are a solid piece of plastic and they're larger, so you actually get better gliding motion. And at the same time, the Bacon Rind's only got a single twister tail compared to the double twister tail of the Brush Hog and the Power Hog. So what that means is you have less drag and less resistance in the water because you only have one twister tail that's wanting to slow the bait down versus two legs, which are going to be grabbing water and slowing the bait down. So when I'm moving the Bacon Rind, I'm actually going to get further gliding motion out of it, which to me is really key in terms of triggering strikes. So the Gambler Bacon Rind is actually back in stock and you can buy it now. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I still have a bunch of the old school ones, like you can see here, that are hanging on the wall. So if you haven't tried it, I suggest you try it. The other two are very similar again. So you got the Power Hog by Berkeley, the Brush Hog by Zoom. Again, they've got two long appendages. You'll disconnect these on the Berkeley. I mean, you can see they're pretty similar baits. They've both got the big flaps on the side, the big appendages up top, and they both are excellent baits that do a really good job at gliding. So those are the baits that I really like. This whole thing goes back to when I was younger. I would recognize the fact that when I was fishing these in the early part of the summer, I was getting a lot of bites during that time on these creature style baits. And it seemed like it would kind of die off a little bit as we went into the summer months. So since then, what I've realized is they are really good for that transition period because of the things I mentioned before. But you gotta fish it in the right manner. So there's two ways that I really like to fish these big creature baits. The first way is on a Texas rig. So just a straight Texas rig. I like to use either a 1/4 ounce to a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight. But the key is you do not peg the weight. You leave it unpegged. You're going to use this more as a casting bait. So yes, you can fish it Texas rigged. If you see laydowns and that type of thing, you can fish it through cover, but you're really fishing it more as a casting bait. You're making long casts up along the shoreline, and then you're going to kind of make a sweeping motion. So when you sweep your rod, the bait's going to get pulled forward. When you stop sweeping the rod, your tungsten weight's going to slide down your line, and that's going to allow the creature bait to then glide. And that's the key. That bait will glide for several feet, presenting itself as a very easy opportunity at a large meal for a post-spawn fish. So that's the number one way I like to fish it. The second way is a very similar, even though it's a different presentation, and that's to use it on a Carolina rig. And again, though, the presentation's similar in the fact that the Carolina rig, you have your weight several feet in front of your bait. So when you pull it, your bait has no weight attached to it, and it's just gliding around behind your Carolina rig weight. In both cases, the key is you have good gliding motion, you've got a big bait that's an easy meal for a post-spawn fish. You know, for me, you're going to be looking at shoreline cover because a lot of times immediately following the spawn, what happens is you have your males that are still up shallow, potentially guarding fry, and you have females that generally will move to the nearest thickest cover. So if that's a lay down tree, they'll be there. If there's a stump in the water, they'll be there. Maybe a grass clump, maybe a dock. They'll be there for a little bit, and then they'll move out to like the first deep contour line. So if you've got a good steep break line or a ledge in front of the spawning bay, if you've got points at the mouth of the spawning bay, those fish will work their way back out through those cover areas first. And that's where something like your Carolina rig comes into play. So if I'm beating the bank through some of that cover, I've got it on an unpegged Texas rig. If I'm fishing the points or I'm fishing some break lines, I'm going to be using it on the Carolina rig. But I'm telling you what, guys, this is the time. Post-spawn blues doesn't have to be blues if you're throwing your big creature baits. If you haven't used creature baits, guys, you need to try them. I'm telling you, this is the time for a lot of parts of the country when the creature baits shine. So check them out, guys. If you have other creature baits that you like to use, throw them in the comment section so that other people can learn from you guys as well. And thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tip. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned, another video coming out tomorrow.